Daf Yomi is Gittin Daf Mem Ches Gittin 48. Today's Daf Yomi, we're going to start on the bottom line of 47b. Gemara is discussing a dispute, a debate between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish about whether or not we say Kinyan Aperos is Kinyan Aguftami or not. So Rabbi Yochanan is of the position that if you acquire just the fruits of the land, then it's as though you acquired the whole land itself. And so if you acquire the rights to get the fruits of the land, it's as though you acquire the whole land itself. And so therefore, for this reason, one of the practical ramifications is if you are buying the rights to the fruits of the land, you would bring those fruits as bikurim, as the first fruits of the temple, and you would say the passage on which is included in that passage, the land that you gave to me. Whereas for Rish Lakish, the opinion, Kinyan Aperos Lav Kinyan Aguftami, just acquiring the fruits does not mean you're the owner of the land. Therefore, you wouldn't recite the Bikurim passage. You would be bringing it without reciting it. And the Gemara says in the bottom line of 47b, that Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish follow their position. They're consistent. Tidmar Mocher Sadeu, somebody who sells his field, Bisman, top of 48a, Shayoval Noeg. So somebody who sells their field during the time of the Jubilee year, when the Jubilee year was in active, was people were practicing it, then the land went back to the original owner, the Stei Achuza went back to the original owner in the Jubilee year. So somebody who sells his field during the time of the Jubilee year, really Rashi points out that every sale then is just for the fruit, because the essence of the land goes back during the Jubilee year. So under those circumstances, Rabbi Yochanan says maybe Vikore, presumably because Rabbi Yochanan says Kinyan Aperos as like Kinyan Aguf, whereas Rish Lakish says maybe the Einokor. And if you buy land during the Jubilee year, you don't recite the Bikurim passage. The Gemara explains Rabbi Yochanan says maybe Vikore because he says Kinyan Aperos Kinyan Aguf Dami, acquisition of fruits like the acquisitions of the property, whereas Rish Lakish says maybe the Einokor, you don't recite it because it says Kinyan Aperos is not a Kinyan Aguf Dami. So the Gemara now says, we need this halacha of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, the debate between them, both by Bikurim in general and also by the case of the Jubilee year. So what's the reason why we need it to be taught in both places? Because if we would just have this case by Bikurim in general, by you selling the land in general, we would say in that case, Rish Lakish says you bring it, but you don't recite it. Kama Rish Lakish. There, Rish Lakish says maybe the Einokor. Why? Because when you bought the land, that's the Perikanachas. You only bought it for the fruit, so therefore Rish Lakish says you don't bring it. But in this case of the Jubilee year, you intended to purchase the land for the Jubilee year. The person purchasing it says, "I'm buying the land." So maybe he would agree with Rabbi Yochanan that Kinyan Aperos is like Kinyan Aguf in that case. And if we only have the case by the Jubilee year, Rabbi Yochanan, maybe in that case, Rabbi Yochanan says Kinyan Aperos, Kinyan Aguf Dami. By a regular sale of land just for the Peros, maybe we would agree with Rish Lakish. So therefore, we need this halacha to be taught in both the case of the Jubilee year and just also the case of a sale in general. So the Gemara is going to try and prove this case. Who's right? Tashma, the price it says Akona Ilan V'Karko. Somebody buys a tree and its land, and the assumption of the Gemara is that it's during the Jubilee year. Maybe Vikore. So even though it's during the time of the Jubilee year, he brings it and he recites the Bikurim passage. So isn't this a refutation against Rish Lakish? The Gemara says no. Hacham Ma'askina, Rish Lakish would say that this price refers to Bisman She'ena Yovel Noeg. It's the time where there was no Jubilee year, so that's why there's no Jubilee year. So he brings the fruits and he recites the Bikurim passage. Tashma, another attempt. If you just buy two trees in your friend's field, maybe then everybody says you bring it, but you don't recite it because you're just buying the trees, but not the land, and you have to own the land in order to recite the Bikurim passage. But if it would be three trees, then you'd be bringing the land. Maybe Vikore, you'd be bringing the fruits and the land, and you would be bringing the fruits and reciting the Bikurim passage, and this is during the time of the Jubilee year. So this is a refutation against Rish Lakish. Gemara says no. We have to say in this case also, there's no jubilee year then. So Gemara says, but now we have another teaching. Rav Chisda says, when is the dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? B'yovel Sheni. During the second time there was a jubilee year. I mean, the second time there's a jubilee year, this is how Rashi reads it. Everybody already knows that the jubilee year is only for the fruit. So that's where there's a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, whether you've acquired the essence or not. The Reish Lakish says you haven't, Rabbi Yochanan says you have. But during the first jubilee year, first time there was ever a jubilee year, then the guy doesn't know that he's just getting the land for the fruits. He thinks he's getting it for the essence of the property. Then even Reish Lakish would say Divrei Hakol, maybe the Korah. Even Reish Lakish would say he brings it and recites it. Because clearly he didn't think he was just getting it for the fruits. So therefore, once we say that, we're going to say, then there's another reason why this price is not problematic, because we don't have to say it's during a time when the Jubilee year is not applicable. We could say, well, one is when the Jubilee, when it's the first Jubilee, then he's maybe Vikora. And during the second Jubilee, that's when he's maybe V'eno Korah. That's how Rashi reads it. The Meiri says, now what's Yovel Rishon and Yovel Sheni? The first time in the person's lifetime he experiences the Jubilee year, then he thinks he's maybe Vikora, even according to Reish Lakish, because we're going to say that he assumes he's getting the land back, but during the that he assumes it's his land. But during the second Jubilee year, he's already experienced it's not his, then he's maybe V'eno Korah. So let's say this dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is actually the same dispute as an earlier dispute amongst the Tanaim, in which case, why do we have to attribute it to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? We would say it's an earlier dispute. And what's the dispute between the earlier Tanaim? Where we learn as follows from Baba Basra 72b. The Baba Basra states, so we as an introduction, Rashi gives us an introduction to this next sugya. There's two types of fields that you can acquire. You can acquire what's called a stay mikneh. That's a field that you acquire. And if you acquire a stay mikneh, the law is that even if you consecrate to the temple, it goes back to its original owner at the Jubilee year, because you didn't really own it. You just got it until the time of the Jubilee year. And then there's a stay achuza. Stay achuza is a land of an inherited field from going back to when the land was divided, as we learned in Parshas Pinchas in this week's portion. So a stay achuza goes back to the original owner, but there is one way in which it doesn't, and at least one way, and that is if the owner of the field consecrates the field, and then he doesn't redeem it from the temple, and the temple sells it to somebody else, and then that field goes back to the temple in the Jubilee year, not to the original owner. So Leima Ketanoi. So let us say that this dispute about whether Kinyan Paris Kinyan Aguftami between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is like the same dispute of earlier Tanaim. So let's say somebody purchased a field from their father. They bought it from their father. So it's their father's field during the Jubilee year. Go back to him. Viktisha, and the person who bought it, let's say Reuven buys it from Yaakov, and Reuven makes it hektish. He gives it to the temple. And then the father dies. So how do we know that field is now have the law of a stei achuza, meaning to say, if he doesn't redeem it, it's going to go to the temple at the Jubilee year. Because the verse says, imes, and this is based upon a pasuk, imes stei mikna so asher lo mi stei achuza so. If it was a stei mikna, it goes back to the original owner, but not a stei achuza, which means sada she'ena ru'uyo yo stei achuza. That what field goes back to the original owner? If it was not worthy to be a stei achuza, yot tazu, but that excludes this scenario, she'ru'uyo yo stei achuza, because this field was capable of becoming eventually a stei achuza. And so therefore, it goes back to the original owner. That's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Whereas Meir says, let's say if Reuven buys the field from his father Yaakov, and then Yaakov dies. So, and then he only consecrates it, not while his father's still alive, but after his father died. That field is going to be like a stei achuza. Says the verse, if it's a stei mikna and not a stei achuza, which means sada she'ena sada achuza, a field that goes back to the original owner if it was not a stei achuza. But this field is a steachuza, so it goes to the temple. The Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. But according to Rabbi, so now the Gemara says, let's analyze this source, where it's according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to Rabbi Shimon. Let's analyze this Mishnah according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. Meis aviv that if the father died and then he consecrated it, you don't even need a pasuk to tell us that it becomes a steachuz and he's going to lose it if he doesn't redeem it from the temple before the Jubilee year. Okay, so what's the core of this dispute? The Rabbi Meir is in a position like Rabbi Yochanan, Kinyan Paris, Kinyan Guftami. Rabbi Meir must be in the position that acquiring the fruits to the land is acquiring the land itself. And so therefore, in this case, after the father dies, he didn't really inherit anything. Therefore, so therefore, if it's an scenario where the father died, and then he consecrated it, we need a pasuk to tell us that under those circumstances, that since he didn't really inherit anything, and his father has died after he had bought the field from him, he didn't really get anything. He already had the field. So therefore, if he consecrates it at that point, we need the pasuk to tell us that under those circumstances, it is like a stay achuz under those circumstances, even though we had already acquired it. Rabbi Yehuda Sav and Rabbi Shimon Sav, they're of the position kinyan aperos are not lavka kinyan guftami, and so therefore it's not like you acquired the guf and therefore now that his father dies, he's inheriting it now, and then he consecrates it afterwards. So therefore, if the father died and then he consecrated, because it's obviously an inherited field. So therefore, it's trakra. And when do we need a pasuk according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon? Only in a case where you consecrated it and then the father died. Who did itzrach? That's the case where we're going to need a pasuk to teach us under those circumstances that's a stay achuza. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, no, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak could say it's really not the same dispute. No, even Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon can be in the position that kinyan aperos is kinyan guftami. Rabbi Yochanan could say, I could say even like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon kra ashkachu v'darash. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, what's the reason why they say that they want to include even a case where it's a kedisha that you consecrated and then your father died, that we want to say that that's also a case of stei achuza? It's because they based it on the pasuk. What's the basis of that pasuk? Because the pasuk could have said, if it is the field of acquisition that was not an inheritance. Why does it say why does it say mi stay achuza? So why does it say my mi stay achuza? So it means sadeh she'ena ru'uyo yo stay achuza. So means a field that is not capable of becoming achuza. Yatzazu she'ru'uyo yo stay achuza. But this one that could eventually become a stay achuza, we're going to consider it a stay achuza. And so it's nothing to do with the dispute between kinyan aperos and kinyan guftami. It's just based upon the pasuk teaching us this chiddush. Amar Rav Yosef, Yilad Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kinyan Aperes, Kinyan Aguftami. So Rav Yosef says, were not for the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says that Kinyan Aperes is like Kinyan Aguf, then he wouldn't be able to stand. He wouldn't find an arm and a leg in the base medrash. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. And if they have two brothers who purchase, then the brothers get the inheritance from their father. The father has an inherited field, and the brothers divide it up. So we're going to view them as purchasers. And since we view them as purchasing from each other, it's going to go back to the original owner, going to go back to the same pot in the Jubilee year. These Salkadaita, if we want to say Lavka Kinyan Aguftami, if we want to say Kinyan Paris is not like Kinyan Aguftami, like Reish Lakish says, according to Rabbi Yochanan, since he says Achan Shal Chalko are Lakuchos and they're not the owners, so if you would say they only own the fruits, lo mishkachas the maisi bikurim, then you can never have that anybody brings bikurim except if it was chad bar chad ad Yoshua ben Nun. Except if it was one son that keeps having only one son, all the way to Joshua, because otherwise everybody is only acquiring the kinyan is only because everybody otherwise is only like a purchaser. So you have to say, even though they're just a purchaser and they're just getting kinyan peros, it's kinyan aguftami. Tosfos asked the question. It says, "Rabbeinu Hiksher Rabbeinu Tam, Anu Ech Matzanu Yadeinu V'Ragleinu." But what about the rest of us? So Rabbi Yochanan, he's good. He says, "I say kinyan peros, kinyan aguftami." So even though they're just lekuchos, they're going to get their land back in the. So even though they're just lekuchos, they bring the bikurim because they have the kinyan peros like kinyan aguf. But we paskin like Rish Lakish. That kinyan peros is not a kinyan aguftami. But we also paskin like Rabbi Yochanan that the achan shacholku are lekuchos. So we do paskin that the brothers are lekuchos, but it's not a kinyan aguf like Rish Lakish. So how do they bring the bikurim? How does anybody ever bring the bikurim unless it's one son, the descendant of one son? That's what Rabbeinu Tam asks. We say that kinyan peros is not like kinyan aguf, like we say in Acholetz. And we say there's no breira. That meaning to say that they are like lekuchos and not like inheritors. As we say at the end of Beitza, Paskini Krebo Shai Rav Nachman, the Kaimon Kavase Bedine, Vamrinim Bereish Barak Basic Kedushin, Achan Shachol, Kuvarein Kilkuchos. And so we see, therefore, so that's the question that Rabbeinu Tam is asking. And so, therefore, basically he asked the strong question. So his answer is basically we have to say that it's limited. When we say we paskin like Rish Lakish, we're going to have to say it's in a limited degree. That's what it says. The dafke ba'ahi l'chuda ba'kosev no me'ayom o'achar misa kaimon Rish Lakish to lav kinyan aguf dami. So he said basically not in every case do we paskin like Rish Lakish that kinyan peros lav kinyan aguf dami. And not in every. So basically it's not as expansive a ruling as we might have thought. Okay, so now the Gemara now continues. Amarava Kramas Nisa Messiah Rish Lakish. So Rava says, I have a proof from a pasuk and from the price like Rish Lakish that kinyan peros is not kinyan aguf dami. How so? Kra, what's the pasuk? Because it says on the top of Mem Chesam Beis, it says b'mispar shatnei tuvos imkor. According to the number of years of the Jubilee year, you shall sell it. So we see it goes by the number of the years. And so therefore, the gufa karka is not sold, just the crops. And so therefore, during the Jubilee year, we're just selling the fruit. So it's kinyan peros and not kinyan aguf. And masnisa, we have a brayse in the Tanya b'chorno tal pishnayim b'sadeh chozeres avabiyovel. That even though the brother is going to be able to get a double portion in the field that goes back to the father in the Jubilee year. So therefore, we see from here that why the firstborn only gets a double portion if it's not roy, if it's not something that's coming to him, it's something that he already owns. And so therefore, we see from here that the field itself is not owned by the person who purchased it during Jubilee year. He only owns the fruits. And that's like Rish Lakish, that kinyan peros not kinyan aguf dami. It says Abaye, Amar Abaye, Baal b'nechse ishto, a husband with his wife's assets, even though the husband has the rights to the fruits, like Rish Lakish says, he doesn't own the field itself. Tzarach harsha, he needs permission from the wife before entering into litigation on that property. And we only say that he needs permission when the litigation is not about the fruits. But once he's already entered into litigation over the fruits, since we're going to say that he's allowed to discuss the matter as it relates to the fruits, to go into litigation over the fruits, we're going to allow it also on the essence of the real estate as well. We completed we shall return to you to this beautiful fourth chapter of Maseches Gittin. Hopefully we won't wait till the next cycle. We'll go back to earlier. And we start the fifth chapter, which is called Hanizakin. Fifth chapter continues the theme of Tikkun Olam, different rules that were made in order to better the world, but they don't really have that much to do with Gittin, but it's just that once we're talking about Tikkun Olam, therefore we bring in other topics related to Tikkun Olam. So Hanizakin, so somebody who is damaged, and he wants to go collect the property, Shamalan Ba'idis. He collects the property from the person who did the damage from their idis. So we divide the properties into three categories: idis, beinonis, and ziboris. Idis is class A, beinonis is class B, and ziboris is class C. But this is not objectively class A, B, class B, class C. But this relates to the person's own properties: his class A, his class B, his class C. So if somebody was damaged, he collects from the damager's class A property. Balchov, whereas the creditor, he collects beinonis. He collects from the damager's class B property. Ksuvas isha beziboris. The woman collects her ksuva from the class C. Rabbi Meir says af ksuvas isha beinonis. Rabbi Meir says also that the woman collects her ksuba from the class B property. And let's say you have a lien on a property and you want to collect your money. You don't collect it from the lien property, but when there's free and clear property, you could claim from the person who owes you money. Even if you have a right to collect class B and all he has left is his class C, you still could have to collect the class C. When you go to collect from the heirs, from the orphans, then you collect element ziboris. Then you collect from the class C. You don't have the right to go into the lien property. You can't go into the lien property to collect the fruits and the enhancements in the real estate. So what is this case talking about? So we have to look at Rashi. Rashi says that this refers to somebody stole a field. Let's say Reuven stole a field and he sold it to Shimon. And Shimon planted the field and the field grew a lot of fruits. And then afterwards, the person from whom the field was stolen from, let's say Levi, comes and he collects the fruits with its field from Shimon because Shimon bought it from the robber who was Reuven. And so therefore, the only thing he pays to Shimon is the amount of money spent on taking care of the field. So now the Shimon bought it from Reuven and it was with a guarantee. So he goes back to him and he collects the value of the land, and there he can collect it even from property there was a lien on it. However, the fruits and the improvements he only collects there from the free and clear property. And the Gemara is going to explain why. And then, so you don't take out from the lien property for the fruits or the enhancements, or to support the woman, and the daughters of the estate. You don't take that out from property which has a lien on it because of Tikkun Olam, and the Gemara is going to explain why. If somebody finds an object, that person does not take an oath, also on account of Tikkun Olam. Gemara asks the question, why do we say that this is because of Tikkun Olam, that you collect from the person who's damaged, collects from the best of the property? It's a biblical law. It's a biblical law that if somebody's damaged, he collects from the person's class A property. In the best of his field and the best of his vineyard, he shall pay. So, of course, it's biblical law. So, Rabbi says, no, we need it according to Rabbi Yishmael's position. What does Rabbi Yishmael say? Rabbi Yishmael says that biblically speaking, b'denizak shaminan. What does this mean? That biblically speaking, you collect from the damaged property, the damaged person's properties. Meaning, biblically speaking, look at Rashi. B'denizak shaminan midiraisa. What does it mean? Shehem Aisa Zibar Shalmazik, if the class C property of the damager was the equivalent of the class A property of the one being damaged, then he can only collect it from the equivalent of the damaged person's best property, which means to say he collects it from the class C property of the damager. That's biblically speaking. So therefore, So Rabbi Yishmael says Midiaraisa, but the Nizak Shamina and Kamash Mulam and Tikkun Olam. So because of Tikkun Olam, so we want to be people to disincentivize them to do damage. They collect it from the Mazik's edis, from the Mazik's Class A property. Shemini with the Mazik. My Rabbi Yishmael, the Gemara says, where does Rabbi Yishmael say this? Gemara explains that Tanya Meitav Sadeo Meitav Karmo Yishalem. What does it mean? From the best of his field and the best of his vineyard, he shall pay. Mitav sadeo shall nizak, mitav karmo shall nizak. This means to say, biblically speaking, you take it from the best of the property of the one who is damaged. That's Rabbi Shmuel's position. Rabbi Akiva says, and that's what we just saw, biblically speaking, Rabbi Shmuel says he collected from the best of the property of the one who is damaged. Rabbi Akiva says, no, Rabba of this idea of mitav sadeo, mitav karmo, that's coming to teach us, el agavos, l'nizakin, mina idis. That's to tell us that for damages you collect from the best, the kal v'chomer lahektish, and also for if you made a vow to the temple, we're going to see what it is. If something was given to the temple, it's also collected from the best. The Gemara is going to discuss that. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yishmael, according to Rabbi Yishmael, who says that you collect it from the best of the damaged person's property, biblically speaking. Rabbi Yishmael, Achal Shmeina, that let's say the damager ate from the best of the field. Of course, Misham Shmeina. Of course, he has to pay from the best of the best. Achal Kachusha, but you mean to say that let's say the ox ate the worst vegetables. Would you mean to say Misham Shmeina that he has to pay not fair? He has to pay from the best. Is it possible that the verse is then telling us that he has to pay the Shemina? So I'm Ravidi Bar Avin. No, if you go into Achla Aruga Ben Arugos. No, we're talking about a case where he ate some of the vegetables amongst the vegetable patch. We don't know what he ate. We don't know if he ate the best or the worst. And so therefore, the Mishal Meitav. According to this, you pay him from the best of the crops that are there. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava Ilya Dinan de Kahusha Achal Mishalim Kahusha. So Rava says that doesn't make sense either. If we knew that he ate the worst, he would pay the worst. Now that we don't know, he pays the best. It can't work. If you want to get money from somebody, you have to prove that that's what they ate. So not knowing it is not going to be a solution. So therefore, what does it mean according to Rabbi Yishmael? And this is the way we explained it already earlier. Where the best one of the one who was damaged was equivalent to the worst one of the damager. Rabbi Yishmael Savar, but the Nizak Shaminan. Rabbi Yishmael says in that case, biblically speaking, we judge it by the Nizak's property, i.e., we go to the class A of the Nizak, and it can be paid, therefore, from the class C of the Mazik. Okay, we'll stop here. Yashakoach.